Following the prolonged development cycle, the initial members of the Galaxy class began to arrive at their first deployments in 2364. The sight of these behemoth vessels would be much remarked upon by other members of the fleet as they appeared, with much admiration and jealousy being expressed by those not fortunate enough to have earned an assignment aboard such a prestigious ship. Expectations for this new class in service would be high, and over the next several decades the Galaxy would accomplish much, proving to be a capable and rugged design, even though the class was found to have several deep-seated flaws and issues that would somewhat sully its reputation and common perception. Regardless, the Galaxy class has earned its place in the long lineage of proud Starfleet ships which have pushed the limits of the unknown, expanded understanding, and defended the lives of Federation citizens whenever called upon. When the Galaxy class had been initially planned, it had been intended that a dozen members of the class would be produced, with the significantly less expensive Nebula class picking up the slack in circumstances where the absolute top-of-the-line Galaxy wasn't entirely required. These dozen ships would all be laid down at roughly the same time. With the great amount of development and computer modeling done in the ship's development, leading Starfleet to make the controversial decision to lay down the lead ship of the class, USS Galaxy herself, just a few months ahead of her sisters, foregoing the typically lengthy shakedown and testing period of the initial class ship, which was the norm on Starfleet production at the time. This showed both how confident the Admiralty was in their new ship, as well as the enormous amount of effort which had been put into the design even before a single ship was laid down. Unfortunately, while the fleet had done much in the way of pre-planning in regards to the cost of the Galaxy class, they had failed to be as well calculated as the ship's performance factors at high and low warp, impulse under severe gravitic stress, combat, high radiation factors, computer failure, and almost a million other criteria, with the amount of time, manpower, and resources required to complete a member of the class far outstripping initial estimates, with the ship's advanced isolinear circuitry in particular steadily raising the cost of the overall program, as the Galaxy program would be expected to eat the cost of the new computer system's research and development, by dint of being the initial class to use the system in service. Isolinear circuitry had been very expensive to develop, and itself far outstripped initial cost estimates. Resultantly, Starfleet would be forced to halt the construction on 6 of the initially ordered Galaxy class, having failed to secure the funding needed to complete all members of the class, these 6 hulls being built up to the point of roughly 20% completion before they were moved from shipyards to surplus depots where they could be held until a final decision to complete or scrap them could be made. The 6 ships of the initial production run which were completed would all enter service during the middle of the 2360s. These paused Galaxy hulls would not have long to wait in limbo before they would have construction restarted. The loss of the Yamato in the latter half of 2365 would cause one ship to be pulled from storage, while the resurgence of the Romulan Empire, instability in the Klingon Empire, as well as first contact with the Borg Collective would all help to push Starfleet to restart construction on the paused ships, as, despite the cost, Starfleet suddenly found itself desiring greater capability in their frontline capital ships. As construction restarted on these hulls, the fleet would take the chance to make several revisions to the basic Galaxy design, streamlining and improving a number of systems, not to radically alter the class, but rather to reflect lessons learned during the construction of the other members of the class which had preceded them. At the same time, the fleet would feel the need for further members of the class to reinforce and enhance the fleet's numbers and composition, placing multiple orders throughout 2366 to the tune of an additional half-dozen hulls to be built at Utopia Planitia on a significantly accelerated construction schedule. These new ships would have further modifications to add greater capability to the ships. These new models would have added phaser banks on the nacelles, modified saucer sections with significant internal modifications, namely larger shuttle bays, smaller civilian facilities, Much more capable sickbay facilities, greater internal structural reinforcement, more numerous shield generators, and many other improvements focused mostly around their combat capabilities and survivability in combat. The Battle of Wolf 359 in 2367 would really open the floodgates, with the fleet ordering over a dozen further Galaxy-class ships in the aftermath of the Borg attack on the Sol system. The attack also highlighting the vulnerability of Utopia Planitia and causing the fleet to place these new orders at yards spread across the Federation. Alongside other batches of Starship ordered, these new galaxies would place significant strain on the Federation's infrastructure and logistical lines, representing the largest increase in Starfleet construction in over 100 years. Construction of these new ships would take significant time, as the yards to build them were prepared and made ready to construct ships of this massive size. During this period, the political situation in the Alpha and Beta quadrants would go from bad to worse, with the first contact with the Dominion via the Bajoran wormhole leading to a rapidly escalating confrontation between a Federation-led alliance on the one hand and a quickly growing Dominion front on the other, which centered around the territory of the Cardassian Union. During this build-up in tensions, Starfleet would place further orders of the Galaxy-class ships alongside numerous other classes. The first tranche of ships ordered post-Wolf 359 would just begin entering service when the Dominion War broke out, and once the fighting started, the fleet would rush construction of the remainder of these ships, opting not to install any facilities and features not directly related towards combat as a means of expediting the delivery of these very capable assets to the front lines, where they were needed most. This policy of removing non-combat functionality from the Galaxy class would be taken to a more extreme degree in ships laid down during the war, with much of the internal volume of these wartime galaxies left void space, with only systems related to propulsion, communications, combat, defense, and systems to support their much-reduced crew complements retained. Well over a dozen of these wartime galaxies would be laid down, though none of them would arrive in service in time to participate in the war actively. Post-war, the former galaxies laid down prior to the conflict would be brought into service, with some facilities not included, quickly refitted to include the missing functionality left out during their construction. However, the ships laid down during the war would all have their construction immediately paused as Starfleet considered what to do with them, as the fleet suddenly found itself enjoying a massive glut of ships built during the war, and it was felt that more Galaxy-class ships were not required. Eventually, most of these mostly incomplete hulls would be placed into reserve. The question over what to do with these ships would go unanswered until the last years of the 24th century, when, in the aftermath of the Mars attack, Starfleet would suddenly find itself critically short of large starships and facilities in which to build them. The Dominion War leftovers would be extensively refitted, receiving new systems and altered space frames to bring them more closely up to the new standards of technology introduced in the years since they had initially been laid down. Known as the Ross class, these much-enhanced variants bear a strong resemblance to their initial design roots, but are at the same time so far removed from their initial design that only a small part of their initial DNA remains unaltered. The Ross class has begun to replace original Galaxy hulls on a ship-for-ship basis in the early 25th century, and it's intended to remain in service until well into the middle years of the 25th century as an integral part of Starfleet's force structure. Initially intended to act as the most prestigious diplomatic, scientific, and military platforms of Starfleet's reconstruction efforts, the members of the Galaxy class enjoyed vastly different service lives, with a large number of initial hulls lost in a variety of tragic circumstances. Conversely, other members of the class would experience prolonged delays in their construction, only entering service decades after they were initially laid down and with much enhanced and altered capabilities, enabling them to serve for decades past their initial intended service lives in a rapidly altered galactic environment. representing the pinnacle of Federation starship design in the long period of complacency following the end of the Klingon hot peace, and experiencing a lengthy development and variety of construction and service lives, the Galaxy is an enduring icon from a period fondly remembered in the Federation of the early 24th century, a relic of a bygone era when the frontier was being continuously expanded. Peaceful contact with new species was the norm, and the peace, which had already lasted the better part of a century, was expected to last indefinitely. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. I'm going to put that down. Sorry, I have a slinky, and I'm prone to fidget, so I'm going to put that down. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a like. Subscribe to the channel if you want. Also, as always, all original artwork made for this video is available on the channel's Patreon, where you can get all of the art for free if you want it. Also, I mean, you can support the channel with money, but you don't have to. Really, Patreon is just there as a convenient place to put those pictures. I could do it another way, but I'm lazy, and that was the first idea I had, so that's what I'm sticking with. Anyway, what other extra? There wasn't a video last week, because I intended to make it on Sunday as I normally do, and instead I woke up and I had to drive 10 hours to pick somebody up who was stranded, so that was tons of fun, and then I got back and didn't really have the wherewithal to make a video, and then I had to work in the morning, so it was a whole cavalcade. Very sorry about that. This is the video that was intended to go out last week, obviously sans excuses as to why there wasn't a video, but anyway, yeah, I do hope that you enjoyed this video. This does conclude the Galaxy class video arc, the development of the Galaxy class. There are going to be other videos in the series, not this week, but the week before. There was the video on the Cheyenne class, of course, which is also a member of that sort of generation of ships, and there's going to be others sort of moving forward. So stay tuned for those. I also might make a video on the Enterprise D specifically, so let me know if that's something that you're interested in. But yeah, with all that said, I am going to leave you here. So, yeah, I guess goodbye.